Hey, what's going on, everybody? Jonathan Thames here from Rosie and Ernie Productions. Welcome to the Multimedia Mega Fan channel. In today's video, I'm going to be discussing the 2018 film The Nun. Now, this is the third spin-off in the Conjuring universe, and it's the fifth installment in the overall franchise. Unfortunately, I found this movie to be pretty underwhelming overall. Now, to be fair, I think there are a few different things the film does a pretty decent job with, but I really just couldn't find myself getting drawn into the story or the characters, as all of it felt pretty bland in my opinion. The characters are very monotone and one-dimensional throughout, and the story really doesn't deliver what I was hoping for in regards to getting a well-fleshed-out backstory for the demon Valak, who we were introduced to pretty excitingly in The Conjuring 2. Which, if you haven't seen my review of it, you know I thought it was a much better film. This movie is directed by Corin Hardy, whose only other full-length feature prior to this was a horror film from 2015 called The Hallow, which I haven't seen, but with this movie there were definitely some areas that could have used some refining in terms of delivering a compelling and interesting supernatural horror story. What the movie does well is providing the tone of setting and atmosphere throughout with the lighting and cinematography. The atmosphere, like in the majority of the Conjuring and Conjuring spin-off films, does feel genuinely creepy, and that's largely assisted by the lighting and camera movements. There are also some pretty good effects at certain moments, and in fact that's probably my biggest compliment to the film is its use of practical effects and makeup. However, most of the time these elements are undermined by rushed pacing, which really makes the scare scenes fall really flat in my opinion, and again rely way too much on jump scare tactics instead of building gradual fear and suspense with a rewarding payoff. There are also some edits that stood out to me as being really jarring or distracting to the flow of a few different scenes, where they were either a series of cuts that were made too closely together or made too quickly, or there was just a change in perspective that seemed unmotivated or without purpose or cause, and again it just seemed to disrupt the flow from a visual standpoint. All of these elements are things that were executed so well in James Wan's first two Conjuring films that when putting this movie in context to a shared universe with these films, it's really hard not to see the lack of finesse in the execution of this movie and makes it feel very disappointing and out of place, similarly to the first Annabelle movie, only this movie was given a much better budget and had noticeably much higher production value than that movie did. But additionally disappointing when considering how awesomely the stories and characters are delivered in the Conjuring movies is this movie's lack of story and character building. The movie surrounds an investigation conducted by Father Burke and Sister Irene after the Vatican calls them to the Abbey of St. Carla in Romania, when the body of a hanged nun is discovered by the Abbey's delivery man, a local man of French descent who calls himself Frenchie. While conducting their investigation at the Abbey, both Father Burke and Sister Irene begin to experience strange things as they begin to uncover the evil that dwells within its hallways. Particularly, I really felt like the backstory for Valak, the demon nun herself, wasn't very well dove into or expanded upon. All of the exposition regarding her unfolded very quickly and felt very rushed, and I didn't really feel like there was enough there to really get us to understand what drives the demon or its goals. What we're given is, again, very brief and feels like a very shortcut explanation as to the origins of Valak, and it seems to me like it would have served better as a piece of exposition that would be further built upon throughout the movie, rather than to serve as the sole scene to deliver said exposition. And speaking of Valak, if you came into this movie expecting that you were going to get a decent amount of screen time being creeped out by the movie's central antagonist, then I'd say prepare to be hugely disappointed. Despite the movie being titled The Nun, it actually features very little of the creepy character we were introduced to in The Conjuring 2, who we were set up to believe from the trailers would be the focus of this movie, but actually not so much. Guess when they named the movie The Nun, they thought we cared more about getting to know this character. Now, don't get me wrong, this character had some real potential, but I feel like they actually really wasted that opportunity and shit the bed pretty bad on that one. Without giving anything away, I will say that they completely bait and switch you from what any fan of the Conjuring films might be expecting to be pretty obvious in terms of this character and her potential connection into the rest of the universe. Most especially when considering the casting choice for the role. And I actually read up a little after watching and found out the director was very conscientious in his decision to mislead the audience. Now, I don't have an issue with intentional misdirection as long as the payoff is clever and rewarding enough to justify it. But let me assure you, in this case, it's not. I feel like had they taken the obvious route, it would have served the larger story connecting the films and the universe much better, because where they chose to go with it was completely dull and added no real connective value at all to the franchise's larger story. In addition to an underwhelming story arc and tie-in, I really didn't feel like any of the performances were that great. And I wouldn't pin that directly on the performers so much as I would the writers and the director, because they are pretty believable in how they deliver their parts, but their characters are, again, just very one-dimensional, and all of them have what I think is some really, really bad dialogue. Some, if not all of the lines that I think are meant to deliver a little bit of humor to help us keep engaged with these otherwise pretty bland characters, unfortunately just don't land at all in my opinion, and come across as more annoying than anything. In conclusion, this movie feels like a filler movie that was made only to meet a demand, either from the studio or from the fans or from both, but it doesn't feel like it was made because a group of writers had a good story that they cared about and wanted to tell surrounding and expanding on the lore of Valak. Every element story-wise felt borrowed or recycled, and it just felt lazy, which resulted in the movie again being very uninteresting and underwhelming. Overall, I give the movie a rating of 5 out of 10, and as weird as this may sound, I actually don't recommend it to hardcore fans of the franchise, based on the fact that I, as a fan, really felt that it added absolutely no value to the franchise, most especially from a story standpoint, and actually felt a little frustrated by that fact. Now, if you're someone who's just majorly into these kinds of supernatural movies and aren't really concerned one way or the other with the value it adds or doesn't add to the franchise's story, and you just want to watch a mildly entertaining and standardly pieced together horror film surrounding a haunted abbey with a demonic nun, then I'd say that you may actually get some enjoyment from the film, as it again does have some pretty decent moments and some well-executed makeup and effects. I'd say it's at least every bit on par with a decent episode of Supernatural, which I am a fan of, so again, had this movie not been set up to be in the Conjuring universe and surrounding a character that I was actually really interested in getting to know more about, then I may have actually enjoyed this film a little more. But that's just my opinion. The Nun can currently be found streaming on HBO Max, so if you have a subscription and you decide that you do want to go check this movie out after seeing this review, or if you've already seen the film, come back and let me know in the comments what you thought about it. I want to thank everybody for watching today's review. I hope that everybody out there is doing well, and I'll see you all in the next video.